Hey, and welcome back here to DOLAN'S Dugout with your host, Steve Dolan. I'm Ramon Scott. And Steve, great interview last week with Anthony Lawrence, former Grossmont Foothiller great and USD great, but we're going to get caught up on the basketball season right now, Steve. And we'll talk about the preps in just a minute, but you're the official statistician for television of the San Diego State games. I've put us here right in the AHOS Arena where tonight, Steve, our undefeated Aztecs, the only undefeated team left in the country, are going to be at home. Steve, we're a 23-point favorite against the Wyoming Cowboys. They might not even score 50 tonight.
Well, Ramon, thanks so much for having me again. As far as tonight's game is concerned against Wyoming, it would be a monumental upset if Wyoming were to win this game. I mean, the Aztecs, like you say, are favored by 23 points. I've seen it as high as 24 and a half. The thing about tonight's game, of course, it will be on the CBS Sports Network at 8 o'clock local time. And Ramon, one thing about Wyoming, this team's terrible. They're 0-8 in conference. They lost at home by 20 points to San Diego State. What people have to remember is Wyoming's a tough place to play when you're playing up there in that 7,200 feet of altitude. So if they lost by 20 at home against the Aztecs, I mean, wow. But here's the thing you got to remember. The Aztecs were a 29.5-point favorite against San Jose State back on December 8th. And if not for a miracle shot by Malachi Flynn at the end, San Jose State would have upset the Aztecs, and we wouldn't even be talking about the Aztecs being undefeated. So I'm sure Coach Brian Dutcher has been talking to his team this week about, yeah, you can talk about how bad Wyoming is, but remember how bad San Jose State supposedly was when they came here, and they came with them, again, of a 3-point shot at the end, kind of a miracle shot of beating the Aztecs. So, again, the thing about the Aztecs, Ramon, is, they've got a target on their back now. They've got 10 games left in the the Mountain West Conference before the Mountain West Tournament. I'm thinking of the old days there. But 10 more games until the Mountain West Tournament, and then in that tournament, you play 3 games if you win. I could see the Aztecs possibly running the table. Kempon now, which is a very good service, they have them finishing 28-1. Now, who that one's going to be, I don't know. But here's the issue. Again, when everybody's shooting for you, you got to watch out for games like the San Jose State game, like the Wyoming game. I don't know. What's your take on the Aztecs?
Well, yeah, you mentioned the KenPom and the projection of the 28-1 record. Really, the one loss is just thrown in as kind of variance because they're going to be favored in all 10 of those games. You just expect a basketball team to lose a game. And we talked about it before, Steve. Secretly, I want this team to run the table, right? I want them to finish undefeated, win the national championship, and give us our greatest thrill as a San Diegan, possibly as a sports fan, long-suffering as we are. But you know what? We might want to taste defeat one time to make them just that much more hungry and to bite them a little bit and scare them and let them know what they need to do. It might even be better, like you said, to lose a game to a team like Wyoming, which is very comparable to San Jose State. If you look at the KenPom rankings, they're both ranked in the around 300th or so. But, the toughest game left has got to be the last game of the season at Nevada. You look at what happened on Saturday. Look, the Aztecs, they didn't struggle. Nevada played a pretty good game, I thought, last Saturday. But you know what? All of a sudden, we got right into the second half, and boom, the Aztecs were up double digits. That's how good this team is. Steve, last time we talked about the Aztecs 2 weeks ago, I asked you if this was the best Aztec team ever. And, of course, everyone wants to compare them to the 2011 team.
Oh, wow.
Let me ask you this. Can this team win the national championship?
Can they? Absolutely. But, Ramon, here's the thing you got to be real careful with. I heard Coach Brian Dutcher on radio yesterday, something he said. Once you get to the tournament, that NCAA tournament, it's amazing how the games are. Okay, Virginia won last year. They won 6 games to win the national championship. 3 of those 6 games came right down to the last shot. So there is a lot of luck involved. I mean, San Diego State a couple years ago, they were within a Trey Kell 3 of beating Houston, and Houston went quite a ways in that tournament. So really, it's just a lot of it's the luck of the draw, too. Is this team capable of winning the national championship? Absolutely. But is this team capable of losing maybe even in the second round if they're a number 1 or 2 seed? Absolutely. So, again, I know I'm really not giving you a great answer, but yeah, they're good enough to win it all, but they're also, within a bad break of not even getting to the Sweet 16. So that's what you can be careful about. You can't look ahead, especially once you get that NCAA tournament. And let me say one thing about in the Mountain West right now, Ramon, assuming San Diego State beats Wyoming tonight, and if UNLV were to beat Nevada this week, going into Sunday when San Diego State plays at UNLV, San Diego State would be undefeated in conference. UNLV would have 1 loss. So theoretically, if Nevada were to win this week if UNLV were to beat Nevada and then UNLV were to beat San Diego State would be 20-1 and they would be second in conference based on a loss to UNLV. But that being said, here's how weak the Mountain West is, Ramon. Yes, UNLV's in second place right now. They only have 1 conference loss. Their non-conference record was 5-8. So that's why, again, San Diego State's going to keep falling in the net ranking, which is the big deal, so to speak. But all they can do is beat the people they play. We've heard that cliche 1,000 times. Like I say, they're going to be favored in every game. But again, if they do drop a game, hopefully it's not against a Wyoming or a lower division team like that, because that will really drop them. But then again, the whole season is going to come down to the NCAA tournament. That's the thing. You play 30-some games in the Mountain West tournament. You're going to play up to 3 games. None of that's going to really matter because it's all going to come down to 1 game in the NCAA tournament.
Steve, I'm throwing out the conference weakness in this case because I'm looking now at personnel, and yes, I do expect the Aztecs to run the table and win these final 10 games. The toughest games probably being when Utah State comes here on February 1st, and then the game I mentioned at Nevada. And don't forget that conference tournament is played, in Las Vegas. So that makes things a little bit different as far as the Rebels are concerned. And I want to see the Aztecs not slip up in the conference tournament. I'd much rather have a nondescript game in the regular season be the loss if there is one. But, man, it would be incredible if this team could do something special like that. But you sit courtside for each of these games. So what I'm talking about now is throwing out kind of the conference weakness, because we know that this Aztec team is far superior to all of these teams in the conference, and it comes down to me a matter of personnel. When you got a player like Malachi Flynn, who's going to be, a likely NBA player, the man from Washington State who came down and probably the most important player on the team. Yes, Flynn is the most valuable player of this team, but Steve, the most important player on this team is the former Vanderbilt Commodore, the man from New Zealand, Yanni Wetzel. He, it looks like, is the key to making this team go with his leadership and his skill.
Well, Moni, you got to remember in last Saturday's game against Nevada, Wetzel had 17 points, a career-high 16 rebounds, and 2 blocked shots. So, yeah, he is a main cog, and especially with Nathan Mensah probably sidelined for the rest of the year with a respiratory issue. It's funny with that Wetzel, too. Figure about last year, his team also had a 0 in conference, 0 wins, and now he's with a team that had 0 losses. That's why he, KJ Fagan, and Malachi Flynn all came here from other programs, was to win. I think, Moni, one thing that's very interesting that Pete Gillen, the great CBS Sports Network announcer, used to coach places like Villanova, Xavier, Providence, I believe it was. Something he told Bryce Miller, the San Diego Union Tribune, last week. This was interesting, where Pete said nowadays to win in college basketball, you either have to have these one-and-done players, these great freshmen that will play 1 year and maybe win you a championship to go on, or an older team. And, there's nothing in between. And with San Diego State now, they went last year with a bunch of freshmen. It didn't work because those weren't one-and-done freshmen. But now you got the older team. You've got Yanni Wetzel coming in as a senior. You got KJ Fagan coming in from Santa Clara as a senior. Malachi Flynn as a junior from Washington State. So all of a sudden, this team's gone from being real young and inexperienced to real old. And I think that's what's made a big difference this year, is there's a leadership there that hasn't been there. And then you have a third-year player, a junior like Matt Mitchell, who just, with Mensah out, Mitchell's come on to start now. And I think that's made a big difference, too, is that Matt Mitchell has really been playing great this year. He lost probably 20 pounds over the offseason. So this team has a lot going for it. I don't see why they can't make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. But like I said a minute ago, NCAA tournament, you see a lot of funny bounces, too.
Yeah, Steve, I think that's a great thing about this team a little bit too is the chemistry. When we talk about guys who have been in this program for 3 years now, like Matt Mitchell, like Jordan Shackle, those guys combined with these transfers, it's just making for an interesting chemistry that really makes this team look on the surface. If you look at those guys, ignore the opponent on the court. You could stick the words, Kentucky or Kansas on the front of the Aztec uniforms, and it wouldn't be far-fetched. This team is elite and compare with all of those top teams. I'm kind of disappointed that the metrics, the Ken Palm rankings, the net rankings maybe going down. Look, the thing that's going to go up is the AP poll, right? The one that kind of you and I follow, right? This week, how about it, Steve? Number 4 in the AP poll, just like that 2011 team. Keep winning. Look, Gonzaga's ahead of us. Remember in 2011, San Diego State beat Gonzaga earlier in the season in that. And they're looking at the 2 top teams on the West Coast right now, number 2 and number 4 in the AP poll. Somewhere down the line, it'd be awesome to take on Gonzaga in a big game.
Well, Ramon, you bring up a great point. This is what's interesting about this college basketball season. The Blue Bloods, the Kentuckys, the Dukes, and even the Kansas to some extent aren't the absolute powerhouses they've been in the past. Now, I don't think it's going to happen, and I think the odds would be 100-1 against it. But what about these so-called mid-majors? How about this for a Final Four? Mid-majors, San Diego State, Gonzaga, Memphis, Dayton. Could happen. I doubt it. But, I wouldn't bet against any of those 4 teams right now with the way they're playing.
Well, look at some of these other teams on the West Coast, too. I mean, Oregon's thrown in a real couple of clunkers of late. They've fallen down to number 12 in the poll. And, hey, Baylor right now, that 15-game winning streak, they're going to have a tough one this Saturday at Florida. The Big 12 SEC Challenge is this Saturday, and I think it's just kind of interesting. I want to mention this, just a little tidbit. I want to maybe compare it to what's going on at Viejas Arena right now with, I'm going to call out right now, the resurgence of the show. I'm going to give a little bit of criticism to one of the nation's top student sections for their disappearance kind of over the last few years, and then all of a sudden filling it up again. Great to them, great for them, and I'm really proud of them and everything that they stand for and do a great job. But a little bit of disappointment there for a few years when there were some empty seats. I remember, Steve, I kind of snuck into the I don't want to say snuck in, but in that 2011 season when BYU came here and Jimmer came in that game, and we ended up losing that game, remember, I think by 10 or 13 points. But I sat in the show because I just wanted the experience. I mean, I don't want to know if I should tell anybody I was in my 40s sitting there. Yeah. In the show, and you can't let up. You have to do everything the show does. You can't sit there and be an old man and not put your finger up when there's free throws and things like that, because those kids are going to get on your case. So you got to be ready when you're in the show, and I was on that night. But Steve, Kansas this Saturday when they play in the Big 12 SEC Challenge, I know you can appreciate this, would be the 300th consecutive sellout at the Fog.
Oh, yeah. You know what's funny, Moni, back in the 1980s, I was traveling San Diego State basketball. I can remember back then going to Allen Fieldhouse where Kansas played then and still plays. The experience was just unreal. I mean, the whole town was into the game. I mean, it was just incredible. That back then, I mean, Kansas beat San Diego State pretty bad. San Diego State didn't have a very good team, but I mean, it's one of those experiences in the years that I traveled with San Diego State that I'll never forget. And I want to go back to what you said about the show. You bring up a good point. One thing about San Diego, I know people don't like hearing this, but let's be honest, it's a bunch of front runners. I can remember when the Chargers went to the Super Bowl 25 years ago, all the local TV stations, that's all they talk about would be, the Chargers, and they'd have people on there, yay, Chargers, I've been a Charger fan for my life. Yeah, those people saying that wouldn't have known the difference between quarterback Stan Humphries and right tackle Stan Brock. San Diego is a front runner town. But that being said, I'll tell you what about the show. Early in the year, that section was half empty. And now, last Saturday, Moni, about 20 minutes before the game, I looked up, I took a photo of it all because there's a red out, all the red there. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what it used to be like. What impressed me about last Saturday's game, too, about the fans, I mean, every game this year, you always see like there's at least one area, even when there's been sellouts, so to speak, where there's one area where there's the red. You see the seats on the screen right now where there's, not red, people wearing red, but red because people aren't sitting there. When that game started Saturday, I looked around the arena, it was like, there's not one empty seat here. That was impressive.
And what do you expect tonight? I mean, with that 8 p.m. start, I would imagine the students actually might like that late start. The show might still be going off tonight, even for this Tuesday night, 8 p.m. And here's the thing, Steve, 11 Eastern time. And we talk about, not getting the exposure that you need. I don't think it matters now. The team's ranked 4th in the country, and everyone knows that they're the only undefeated team left. But it's going to be awesome tonight still, right?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think the 8 o'clock start will affect the crowd at all. Here's something interesting about the show now, too, for the students. This is their last free night, so to speak. I mean, school starts tomorrow. They spring semester does. So I think this is kind of like their last night on the town, so to speak, before school starts. So I expect it to be pretty festive in there. And again, what I saw Saturday, again, it just brought back such memories of what it used to be like. I mean, this is what happens in San Diego when a team starts winning. Because like even now when you watch local TV, at all, they're talking about the Aztecs, not just in sports, but on the news side. And pretty soon, I'm sure they're all going to start wearing Aztec gear and all that stuff if they keep going undefeated. But my question always was, where were these people back early in the year when the Aztecs were 2-0, 3-0, 5-0? They're all coming out of the woodwork now. But that's okay because, there's a reason for it. This team, as I say, this team, as I've been saying, it has a chance of going a long, long way this year. But again, they're going to play 30-some games before the NCAA tournament, and none of that will matter come about March 19th or so when the tournament starts, because it's all going to come down to those games and maybe a break at the end of the game.
Yeah, and Steve, I made an appearance before the season in a college basketball show that was about betting, and I was brought on as kind of the person to talk about San Diego State, and I mentioned at the time, I think my quote was, the team is very, 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 very good, and that they could have a tremendous season that could include a Sweet 16 appearance. I don't know, if we kind of saw this coming. Maybe we did with the schedule, but I think the signs were there to be a very, very successful season. So it does kind of, probably have a chuckle that the fans were a little bit slow to grasp what was going on. But make no mistake, for any casual fans that think we might be setting ourselves up for the San Diego disappointment, hey, every team but one is going to not make it to the national championship. But it's not that we're playing teams from Mountain West playing a weak schedule. Yes, that is true. But the personnel is elite. And this team that they're putting on the field is in a competitive situation with all of those blue bloods when we get to the NCAA tournament. And yes, it will likely come down to be which is the better team on that night. They're not going to have a game necessarily, I don't think, where they're going to fold or not match up skill-wise with the other teams. It might just come down to who has the better game on a given night.
Yeah, and one thing for Moni, for people in San Diego to remember too, in the NCAA tournament, it starts out with 68 teams. 64 of those 68 won't make the Final Four. 66 of those 68 won't make it to the finals, and 67 of the 68 won't win the finals. So keep that in mind too. No matter what happens in the NCAA tournament, this has been such a successful season for San Diego State. As you know, tonight with a win, San Diego State will be 20-0, which will match their best start ever. And then it would be, would really be something to win number 21 at UNLV, because like you say, that's where the conference tournament is. I do want to say one thing about the conference tournament this year, though, Moni, that people have to remember. It was moved up a week because there's some sort of big convention in town the week that the tournament normally would have been, and they didn't want people paying $500 a night to get a hotel room. So the tournament's been moved up a week in Vegas. So instead of finishing that tournament on a Saturday and then playing on a Thursday or Friday, San Diego State will finish it on a Saturday, but a week earlier on Saturday. So they could go almost 2 weeks without playing a game between the end of the Mountain West tournament and when they get in the NCAA tournament. So rust could be a factor too. I mean, I hate to bring up negatives, but look at the Baltimore Ravens. You make the argument, were they rusty when they lost to the Tennessee Titans? I don't know, because usually the number one seeds win, even if they've rested their people. But then again, like I say, the Aztecs, there's going to be a long stretch between the end of the Mountain West tournament and when they go to the NCAA tournament. It's going to be even longer than when they took their, break for finals during the fall semester.
Yeah, and looking ahead, the one thing you want to see San Diego State get, you don't want to see them get shipped out which has kind of been the downfall of some of the tournament teams that we've actually had. Obviously, none of them were as good, except for that, 2011 and that other team, as good as this team. But, Gonzaga kind of holds the cards right now as far as earning that number one seed. So that's going to be the interesting thing. You look at a team, look at BYU, for example. Gonzaga just played BYU, and BYU has, played very, very well this season. Haas is looking great, but Gonzaga ended up beating them. I don't know. It was like a 23 or 24 point game.
Points, yeah.
Saturday, right? So, I want to see San Diego State get that number one seed out west, but they still have a hump to get over as far as that's concerned. And I failed to mention, you asked me about some of the tough games coming up. Both games against New Mexico are coming up. Not that New Mexico is anything special, but always a challenge. It's going to be on Wednesday, January 29th, when the Aztecs go to the pit.
Yeah, because they'll have those back-to-back road games at UNLV and at New Mexico. And those are, if not the two toughest places, two of the toughest places to play in the Mountain West. So, they got to be careful of that. I mean, like you say, I hate to say, as in the Mountain West, everything's at altitude, so it's a tall mountain to climb, so to speak. But again, this team seems to right now have that it factor. And it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out. Because again, like we said earlier, the Aztecs are going to be favored in every game. But then again, they get the target on their back now more than anybody else in this conference does. So you got to look out for that, because you're going to get everybody's best game now.
Well, that'll kind of wrap up our conversation. I think for this week, we got several more weeks to talk about this team, and each week just checking off the boxes, another opponent. And it was funny, Steve, we broke away from basketball last week, but over the 2 weeks since we last talked about them, Auburn not only lost once, but they lost twice. So San Diego State really the only undefeated team, as everyone knows, and a couple of teams sitting there at the top of the poll with one loss. Of course, that Baylor team, Red Hot Gonzaga, has one loss. I think everybody else, up at the top, has two or more losses. So it's just been an incredible story, underreported still nationally, I would say. But you are seeing, like I said, Doug Gottlieb and another basketball expert this week also had the Aztecs as their number one team. And they're definitely worthy of anyone who put them at number one. Let's start to see some first place votes this week. I think Baylor, they might lose that game at Florida. It's a non-conference game. They have the 15-game winning streak. They have all those tough games. The Big 12's the best this year, Steve, again. So, Baylor's got probably more losses on the horizon. Gonzaga, they might not, but Kansas, they also have a tough schedule too. So it's going to be funny. Gonzaga and San Diego State could end up being 0-1 loss, somehow end up number one, number two. I don't know. Maybe the voters would do that.
Here's the thing, Moni, to be concerned about, though, with San Diego State. And if San Diego State does get a number one seed, but it's not out west, then they go, let's say, the Midwest. Even if San Diego State's a number two seed and stay out west, I would probably rather see that, because San Diego State has a possibility of playing in Sacramento the first two games and then the Sweet 16 in LA. But if they're not in the West regions, that's not going to happen. If they could theoretically never leave California and get to the Final Four. But again, that's all going to be based on seeding. That's why I say I'd rather see them be a number two in the West and stay West than a number one in the Midwest and get shipped out to wherever.
That is so interesting, because, the committee might actually hesitate to kind of make them a number one seed and maybe use that excuse of, the typical, Gonzaga, of course, they're always worthy no matter how weak that conference is. And, obviously the conference isn't terribly weak, especially with a team like St. Mary's in there all the time. But they, like you said, maybe they could keep San Diego State as a 2 seed. They might be worthy of earning a number one seed and getting shipped out, but that's yet to be determined. We'll have to see if we can win all these games and bring history to a town that's starving for championship success.
Well, Moni, that's interesting to bring that up. If I could, just to stay on basketball, to switch subjects, we had, speaking of number one teams and all, we had an interesting poll this week in our San Diego Union Tribune prep basketball poll. Do you mind, maybe if you don't mind, if you give people how the poll turned out, and if you don't mind giving how you voted, I'll give how I voted and maybe a reason why.
Yeah, no doubt, Steve. And I think that's one of the things that we heard from John Maffey as he sent out this week's poll, that there was a tie at the top spot. And you might not guess, you might think it was maybe Cathedral and Saints tied for the top, especially after Cathedral went on the road. And I don't know if it was an upset, but they beat Saints. Saints were kind of my number one team, but Foothills Christian earned 7 first place votes. Maybe if there was a tiebreaker, that's it. But both teams earned 121 points from the 13 voters this week. Foothills Christian, 7 first place votes. Cathedral Catholic, 5 first place votes. Saints still got 1 first place vote. Something tells me that it wasn't my first place vote. I voted Cathedral 1 and Saints 2 and Foothills 3. Maybe the 3 teams right now are interchangeable, but as it stands right now, I think Cathedral had the win on the road. Maybe you could remind me what John said, what these results were, right? Cathedral beat Saints on the road. Foothills owns a win over one of the teams, but also has lost to one of the teams. So maybe those 3 teams are interchangeable. Torrey Pines was 4th, Modern Day Catholic 5th, Poway 6th, Francis Parker, they've been the biggest riser, making the most noise right now. They're up to 7th. Christian High remains 8th. I think you and I both have them higher right now. Santa Fe Christian 9th and Carlsbad 10th. Interesting, Helix 11th, if you will. They were in the ORV category, but they have won now 7 games in a row and on the cusp of breaking into the top 10.
Well, Moni, if I could, you went through the top 10. Actually, in my top 10, and as you say, the top 3 were hard. I went Foothills Christian 1, Cathedral Catholic 2, and St. Augustine 3. And here's why. For instance, in college basketball this week, 3 teams ahead of San Diego State all lost 2 games, so they dropped significantly in the poll. Now, if they'd lost those games a month ago, and you looked at their records now, they might be ahead of San Diego State because that happened a month ago. So what I based my poll on was, like I'm saying, what have you done for me lately? Well, lately, Foothills Christian beat Cathedral Catholic. Cathedral Catholic beat the Saints, so that kind of made my 1, 2, 3. I couldn't figure out how to do it, so I thought, rather than flip a coin, let's just go on the what have you done for me lately? And then after that, I kind of went the way the poll did. 4 Torrey Pines, 5 Modern Day Catholic, 6 Poway, 7 Francis Parker, 8 Christian, 9 Santa Fe Christian, and 10 Helix. And again, not to pat myself on the back, but last week I was the only one who voted for Helix. And I just, until they lose, I mean, I can't drop them out of the top 10. I know what John Singer's capable of doing out there with the Highlanders. And speaking of Helix and speaking of basketball, Moni, I know we got some big games coming up in the Grossmont League this week. Talk about what's going on this coming week.
Yeah, I will, Stephen. I just want to note, though, back to the poll real quick, and I'll get to some of these games. There's some big games tonight in the Grossmont Conference in both genders. But you moved Christian down to number 8, and I still have them at number 6, just chalking it up. They do have 2 losses in league, obviously, so far to Saints and Cathedral Catholic. They might be a little bit behind those teams, so they got those losses. In fact, one of them came at home about 10 days ago to the Saints. And the reason why I have Saints ahead of Foothills Christian, I just, something tells me the Saints are still number 1 out of those 3 teams. But I want to mention something real quick. Chibuzo Agbo might be the player that's kind of regarded as the best player in the county. But right now, the Knights Yassine Garam is probably playing better than anybody in the county. And boy, I might be swinging my allegiance toward the East County player, Yassine Garam. Might be playing better than anybody right now in the county. You know, there are some other players, especially the talented freshman out of San Ysidro that everyone talks about, Mikey Williams. But, you know, these elite teams and the Yale-bound senior, Yassine Garam, really is looking terrific. And also on Foothills Christian, Darian Carter Hollinger, the younger brother of DJ Carter Hollinger, who, Steve, DJ is making a big impact at the University of Montana as a freshman. He was already voted not the freshman of the week, the conference player of the week a couple of weeks ago. So he is really tearing it up for the Grizzlies. But anyway, Steve, tonight in the Grossmont Conference, there's a big game for the boys on the hillside. Helix is 1-0, and they're going, well, they're on the road, right? They're always on the road.
Yeah.
Situation, but they're going to have their first meeting with the 2-0 West Hills Wolfpack. And Maurice Holmes missed the last game for Helix when they edged Grossmont. I always want to say on the road. I got to remind everybody, but we could just say when they played Grossmont, they edged Grossmont without Maurice Holmes. Maurice missed the game. It might have been a disciplinary situation. So hopefully Maurice is back tonight for that big game, because I think West Hills is better than Grossmont, and that could be a tough game for Helix tonight. Really, it's the game of the year so far in the Hills League. Helix 1-0 at West Hills 2-0, and Helix with that 7-game winning streak. Steve, do you think Helix might lose this one?
Oh, yeah, there's absolutely that possibility. Like you say, the tough thing for Helix is every game is a road game, which, I mean, at least once they get to CIF, if they're the higher seed, they won't be playing in their gym, but they will be playing in somebody's gym who they're familiar with, so they'll have somewhat of a home court advantage, which they don't get any game now.
Right. Over in the Valley League, just I want to mention the standings. There's not too many impact games, I don't believe, this evening. But Santana has been the big surprise on the boys' side. They're off to a 2-0 start, along with Granite Hills. And Granite Hills has looked good so far. My preseason favorite, El Capitan, is off to an 0-2 start, Steve. Didn't want to have to mention that to you, but a tough start for the Vaqueros. They actually lost to both Santana and Granite Hills so far, so they're going to have to regroup. And a great job so far by KB Barcelona at Santana. They didn't fare too well in their non-league portion of the schedule, but they're off to a surprising 2-0 start.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens this week in the Grossmont Conference. And Ramon, before we let you go, also another team wanted to talk about, of course, plays right here in East County at El Cajon Valley High School. Talk a little bit about what's going on with the San Diego Kings right now.
Yes, people, the Kings are going to take on Meta World Peace and X versus X Sports.
Yeah.
On Saturday at 7 p.m. at El Cajon Valley High School. So a lot of people criticize Meta World Peace for some of his off-the-court antics, but you know what? He's turned around and become quite a philanthropist as far as getting people involved and young people involved in basketball, and I think that's kind of becoming his hallmark and his trademark a little bit as he brings in his team to take on the Kings. And I just want to mention the Kings because they are now ranked number 1 in the far west region of the ABA.
Wow.
Which means that they are a likely contender once again for the ABA championship later on this season. So please go out and support the Kings this Saturday at 7 at El Cajon Valley High and see Meta World Peace, and I hope I'm saying that right, X versus X Sports.
Sounds right. Well, Moni, I just want to thank you so much for being with me today. And just once again, a reminder, going back to what we talked about first off, tonight, 8 o'clock, San Diego State hosts Wyoming. With a win, San Diego State would be 20-0, matching its best start ever. The rest of their games are on regular linear TV now, no more internet games. Just so people know, CBS Sports Network, most of us out here, if you do get Cox Communications, it's channel 321. The announcers, Carter Blackburn and Pete Gillen, I mean, they're CBS's number 1 college basketball announcing team for the network. So watch them. I mean, it was funny because I worked with those two guys Saturday night, and they're great. Those two guys are just absolutely great. Carter just as smooth as can be. One day, I mean, I think he's going to be working big time at CBS Network. And of course, Pete Gillen, with his great experience in college basketball. So watch the game tonight, not just for the game, but listen to what these guys have to say because they both know what they're talking about.
Yeah, Blackburn actually quite a veteran now at this point. I just want to mention, we'll get out of here real quick, but on the girls' side, there is one good game tonight in the Grossmont Conference, and that's in the Hills League, where 1-0 Grossmont is going to take on 2-0 El Capitan. And El Capitan, of course, a monumental victory. Steve, last Friday night, the El Capitan girls defeated the Mount Miguel Matadors. Mount Miguel's lost like 4 times in league play in the last 20 years, and El Capitan knocked them off in Lakeside. A big victory for Coach Curtis and Mackenzie Curtis leading that team. over the freshman-laden Mount Miguel Matadors. Mount Miguel, they're very young, but they are still Mount Miguel, and they will still get a chance to host El Capitan later this year and try to make up for that loss and try to stay involved. But the league race is going to be pretty tough. There's some other good teams there in the Hills League this season, but I just wanted to mention it to you that Mount Miguel, interestingly, in the poll this week, Mount Miguel was ranked about 16th, and El Capitan did not make it into the poll. But El Capitan was the one who got that big victory. Congratulations to El Capitan girls defeating Mount Miguel in the Hills League. Also over in the Valley League, Santana, a big surprise after their slow start in non-league. Just like the boys, Santana is 2-0 in the Valley League in the girls. And the best girls team right now, Steve, is Christian. They're ranked 3rd in the county. They're 2-1 in league. Their only loss was to number 2 Cathedral Catholic so far at Ice Brady. In league, they're 2-1. And they're the best ranked East County team. So I want to thank you once again, Steve, for joining us this week. We're going to talk more Aztecs each and every week as this goes along, and also follow along with those boys' races. We got some championship contenders, Steve. Grossmont in Division 3 and El Capitan maybe in Division 4 way down the line. Let's get through these league races before we get into that. Thanks a lot, brother, this week. A great talk, especially this Aztec team. Has me all fired up.
Thanks so much, Ramon, and just want to wish everybody a great day.
For Steve Dolan, I'm Ramon Scott. Thank you for joining us.